Hello, my name is Pamela, and I am 34 years old. At present, my life has acquired that stable and clear form that many dream of. I hold the position of public relations specialist at a reputable industrial corporation, and my bank account is replenished monthly with a sum that can, without exaggeration, be called quite substantial. 3 years ago, hard work and discipline allowed me to make the most important acquisition, my own square meters, albeit with a mortgage obligation, like most modern people. And last year, after my grandmother's soul departed this mortal world, her home, which had become the last refuge of my childhood, passed to me as an inheritance. And before we continue, write in the comments from which country and from which city you are watching this video. We are very interested to know from which corner of the planet our video is being watched. Enjoy watching. However, all of this is merely the final chords, the visible result, behind which lies the long and not always melodious symphony of my life. Allow me to tell the story from the inside, for the true beginning of this story has its roots in the distant past, in those times when I was just a child, incapable of understanding the full complexity of the adult world. I had just turned 10 when my childhood was ruthlessly shattered by the sudden death of my father. His heart, which had never complained before, stopped one quiet evening, without warning, without farewell words. It was that kind of senseless cruelty that cannot be explained or accepted. One day, literally on the eve of that fateful day, he was laughing and running alongside, holding the frame of my new bicycle, and his palm, warm and confident, rested on my back, protecting me from falls. And the next morning, the house was filled with a deafening silence, broken only by my mother's sobs. She was devastated, and I, frozen in silent stupor, shared that feeling of complete, absolute loss with her. My father was everything to me, my anchor, my protector, my universe. A year later, my mother, exhausted by loneliness and the burden of responsibility, gave her hand to Steve. At first, he seemed pleasant enough, this man with kind eyes and calm manners. He made my mother find her voice again and even smile occasionally, and a timid flame of hope flickered within my wounded soul. I thought that perhaps life was slowly but surely getting better, that the wound would gradually heal. When I turned 12, my mother had another child, my half-sister Emma, a tiny being with bright eyes. It was from this moment, from her first cry, that everything changed drastically and irrevocably. I, Pamela, the eldest daughter, seemed to vanish into thin air, becoming an invisible person living on the periphery of my own family. My mother immersed herself completely in caring for the infant, spending with her every free minute, and not so free ones too. Steve was concerned exclusively with his own daughter, her well-being, her comfort. And me? I involuntarily turned into an unpaid nanny and housemaid, saddled with all the household chores. "Pamela, can you watch Emma while I take a shower?" My mother uttered this phrase every day, and it sounded not like a request, but a given. "Pamela, I need to do the dishes," Steve would say, without even looking up from the morning newspaper, which he was accustomed to spending hours with. "Pamela, Emma needs her bottle," came my mother's tired voice from another room. This endless stream of tasks, this cycle of others' needs, seemed never-ending. I was 13 years old, and I was doing more housework than many an adult woman burdened with a family. My school grades began to deteriorate inexorably, as I was constantly in a state of exhausting fatigue from the endless fuss with Emma and cleaning. I didn't have a hint of friends, of ordinary teenage joys, because I wasn't allowed to go anywhere after school. My path led strictly from school to home, where my childcare duties were already waiting for me. One day, my grandmother came to visit our house, or rather, this chaos. Grandma Ruth, my deceased father's mother, was a woman with a sharp mind and a blunt, uncompromising character. She observed how my mother and Steve treated me for about an hour, and that was more than enough for her. With a firm step, she approached my mother and, taking her by the elbow, led her to the kitchen to talk in private. I heard every word, although they were, of course, sure I couldn't make them out. "That girl is unhappy. Grandma stated without preamble, and her voice was like a blade. "Can't you see?" "Ruth, it's just very hard for me with a small child in my arms." My mother justified herself, but her tone was defensive. "I need Pamela's help. She's the eldest." "She's not your servant, she's your own daughter," Grandma retorted. "Look at her. When was the last time you saw a smile on her face?" A long, heavy pause fell in the kitchen, more eloquent than any words. Then my mother constrainedly said, "I don't know what you want from me. I can't be in two places at once." And after a pause, added, "Maybe she should move in with you? For a while?" Silence again. And then Steve's voice chimed in, ingratiating and calm. "You know, that might really be a good solution for everyone." I couldn't believe my ears. My stepfather, my mother's husband, seemed to feel almost physical relief at the mere thought of soon being rid of my presence. My mother came out of the kitchen with a pale, confused face and saw me sitting on the edge of the sofa, carefully hugging the sleeping Emma. She came closer and, trying to speak tenderly, said, "Sweetie, dear, tell me, wouldn't you like to live with Grandma Ruth for a while?" I didn't hesitate for a second with my answer, didn't ponder or doubt. "Yes," I exhaled, and in that short word was liberation. The corners of Steve's lips twitched in a barely noticeable but sincere smile of approval when he heard my answer. My mother just nodded, as if expecting exactly that, and quietly said, "All right, then we'll arrange everything." That same day, without delay, I started packing my things. There were pitifully few of them, several stacks of clothes, worn-out school textbooks, and a couple of well-thumbed novels once gifted by my father. I left behind the room that, over all these years, had never become my corner, my real home. Life with my grandmother, in her cozy apartment located in an old but dignified neighborhood, was like stepping into a completely different reality, into another parallel world. She was a literature professor at a local college, and her dwelling, from floor to ceiling, was filled with books. They stood in neat rows on shelves, lay in piles on tables, waiting for their reader, and even the air here was imbued with a special scent, a mixture of old paper, binding glue, and wisdom. Every evening at Grandma's apartment turned into a kind of sacred ritual. She cooked real, complex food, not just to satisfy hunger, but to enjoy the process, the aromas, the presentation. We sat down at the old oak table, and time flowed slowly and wisely over conversation. We talked about everything: books we'd read, school events, philosophical ideas, and simple everyday things. On the very first day, seeing my habitual uncertainty, she said clearly and plainly, "You don't need to clean my house, Pamela. That's my job. Your task now is to be a child and study well at school." For me, accustomed to constant demands, this sounded too good to be true. No one yelled at me, demanding I change diapers or wash a mountain of dishes. No one looked at me as a burden, as a nuisance in their perfectly arranged life. Grandma, on the contrary, seemed genuinely happy with my presence. Her eyes lit up with interest when I shared my thoughts. 4 months later, on one such calm evening, Grandma sat me down for a serious talk. "My dear," she began, taking my hand in hers, "I have officially filed for your adoption. Your mother voluntarily transferred her parental rights to me." I stared at her, unable to immediately grasp the meaning of these words. What does that mean?" I whispered. "It means that now you are legally my daughter," she replied softly, "and this house is your home, for as long as you want it to be." A part of my soul, still unhealed from childhood wounds, felt crushed. My own mother had given me up so easily, so irrevocably, but another, stronger part felt an incredible, all-encompassing relief. Now I was safe. I had a person who truly wanted me nearby, who had chosen me. From that moment on, my life gained solid ground. My school grades, once a source of shame, improved significantly, becoming a point of pride. At school, I finally made real friends with whom I could spend time after classes, without fear of reproach. I read constantly, greedily devouring one volume after another from Grandma's inexhaustible collection, and each book became a brick in the foundation of my new world. For the first time since that terrible time when Dad died, I felt that I belonged to a place and a person, that I had found my own corner of the universe. After moving, I rarely saw my mother, Steve, and Emma. Those occasional visits on holidays or birthdays only confirmed the obvious. They were much happier and more cohesive without me. They were polite and proper enough, but I couldn't help noticing the undisguised relief in their eyes when I was about to leave. Mom filled her Facebook page with dozens of photos of Emma, her first steps, birthdays, kindergarten matinees, and school plays. I searched in vain for a single picture of myself there. There never was one. So I eventually stopped checking altogether. What was the point? Only to repeatedly confirm my own superfluousness. I graduated from high school with honors, entered college on a scholarship, and earned a degree in communications. Grandma was incredibly proud. She came to my graduation ceremony, and I saw tears rolling down her face when my name was called. After college, I found a good job, and after saving up, moved into my own home, gaining complete independence. And it was then, as if by some unseen signal, that my mother suddenly wanted to reconnect. One day, her call came, completely unexpected. "Darling, I think we should start over," her voice sounded through the receiver. "Leave the past behind." Driven by a strange, almost clinical curiosity, I agreed to try. We began to meet occasionally on major holidays: Christmas, Thanksgiving, Emma's birthdays. I brought expensive, carefully chosen gifts for Emma, who by then was a gawky teenager. Mom and Steve looked on with approval, almost gratitude, as she unwrapped my gifts, as if glad that I was finally playing the role of a generous older sister who asked for nothing in return. Emma herself never looked particularly touched or grateful, but I chalked it up to her youth and thought that perhaps, in time, a warmer bond might develop between us. And so, in this measured, superficial rhythm, the subsequent years passed. Our relationship could be described as decent, even respectable, not close but civilized, convenient for everyone. And last year, Grandma died. She was 89. She had lived a long, full, and good life, but her passing left a gaping void in my soul. She was the only truly kindred person, the only parent I had ever known. During the reading of her will, I learned that she had left me her apartment and a substantial sum of $150,000. But that wasn't the only revelation. I also learned something I hadn't even suspected before. It turned out that she owned the very house where my mother, Steve, and Emma had been living all these years. As it emerged, she had owned it for many decades, and when my father died, driven by kindness and a desire to provide shelter for her son's widow and granddaughter, she had allowed my mother to remain living there, asking for nothing in return. I didn't know what to do with this information that had fallen on me, how to process it. Deciding not to rock the boat or stir up the past, I left everything as it was. My mother had never mentioned it, and I didn't bring it up either, keeping the knowledge like a heavy, invisible burden. Sometime later, my mother asked if Emma could live in Grandma's apartment while finishing college, so she wouldn't have to commute across the city. I agreed without much thought. It seemed like the right, noble thing to do, even though it deprived me of potential rental income. At that moment, everything seemed simple and clear. We were a prosperous family, or at least I tried to convince myself that we were. I was at work, fully immersed in proofreading a press release for our new product launch, when the name Mom lit up my smartphone screen with a vibration that disrupted the business-like mood. My finger instinctively hovered over the ignore button. Our communication had long been reduced to formalities exchanged on holidays, but some vague, nagging premonition made me swipe the green icon. "Hi, Mom." Her voice sounded unnaturally cheerful. "Darling, I'm calling about a gift for Emma's graduation." I slowly leaned back in my office chair, and my vision darkened with a wave of disappointment. Emma's graduation ceremony had taken place just a few weeks ago. I had attended it, applauded along with everyone when her name was announced from the stage, and watched as Mom and Steve beamed with happy, undivided pride. For a moment, I even felt a warmth from the illusion of family idol. "Yes, I was just thinking about that," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. I was planning to give her a week in Mexico, let her properly celebrate her success before diving into the job search. On the other end of the line came that telling pause that always heralded a storm. "Well, that's certainly nice," Mom finally said, and a steely note crept into her tone. "But I think she needs something more substantial." I frowned involuntarily, tightening my grip on the phone. "More substantial? Mom, a week-long tour in Mexico is an expensive and wonderful gift for a graduate." "Pamela, you know Emma has been living in your grandmother's apartment for a whole year." Mom's voice became instructive, as if explaining something to a slow child. "She's used to her own space, to independence. A young professional needs a place to live, needs to build their life on a solid foundation." I realized where she was heading, and everything inside me went cold. "Mom, Emma has already been living there rent-free for a year. Do you have any idea how much other students pay for rent? She's had a huge head start, and now, after graduating, she can—" "I never said she needs to move out," she interrupted, and her voice took on that sharp, familiar note from childhood. "But I'm not giving her the apartment if that's what you're thinking," I stated flatly, feeling goosebumps run down my spine. "Pamela, she's your sister," Mom flared up. "Family helps family. All these years you've been so generous paying for her college tuition. Helping with tuition is one thing, gifting real estate is completely different," I retorted, trying to control the tremor in my voice. "How is it different?" Her tone became caustic. "You have your own apartment. You don't need two homes." I took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure. "Mom, I don't have to justify my financial decisions to you. The trip to Mexico is a generous gift. Emma should be grateful for it." "Grateful?" Mom raised her voice to a shout. "After everything we've been through as a family, after how hard we've worked to rebuild our relationship, and this is how you repay it." "Repay what?" My ears were ringing. "I've been more than generous to Emma. I paid for 4 years of her tuition. I let her live in an apartment I could have rented out for income. What more do you want from me?" "I want you to do the right thing," she hissed. "I want you to help your sister start her adult life." "She's already been helped. Free housing is help." Mom fell silent, and for a moment I thought the simple arithmetic of my kindness had finally gotten through to her. But then her voice came through, quiet and deliberate. "Think about it, Pamela. Think carefully." "I've already thought about it. The trip to Mexico. That's my final offer." In response, there were short beeps. She had hung up without saying goodbye. I sat staring at the darkened phone screen, and that familiar tight knot from childhood formed in my stomach again. The nauseating, humiliating feeling that no matter what I did, no matter what I gave, it would never be enough for them. I shook my head sharply, dispelling the apparition, and buried myself back in the press release text, fiercely hoping that was the end of it. The next 2 weeks passed in dead silence. No calls, no messages. I began to allow myself to think that Mom had finally realized the futility of her claims and accepted my decision. Emma would go to Mexico, get her experience, and life would return to its previous, albeit imperfect, track. And at that moment, my phone, lying on the table, vibrated quietly, alerting me to a new notification. Mom had posted something on Facebook, tagging me in the post. It was strange and uncharacteristic. She almost never mentioned me in her posts. I mechanically clicked on the notification and instantly felt the blood literally freeze in my veins, turning to ice. The screen displayed a photo from last Christmas. The 4 of us smiling fakely, standing around a decorated tree. Mom, Steve, Emma, and I. A perfect postcard depicting a happy, normal family. But it was the caption under the picture that made my hands tremble and my temples pound. With immense joy, I announced that Pamela has promised to gift her apartment to my younger daughter, Emma, in honor of her brilliant college graduation. The text read, complete with heart emojis, "I thank God for such a generous and kind elder daughter." I reread these words 3 times, each time staring more intensely at the screen, hoping my eyes were deceiving me, that it was a hallucination from overwork. But no, it was written in black and white, displayed for all to see. Mom had publicly, on her page, announced to the whole world about my non-existent gift. The first comments were already pouring in, one sweeter than the last. What a wonderful sister. Incredibly generous. Emma is so lucky. That's what real family is about. Pamela, you're an angel in the flesh. My head spun from these rapturous exclamations, and a nauseating wave of heat spread through my body. She had done this completely deliberately, with cold, calculated intent. She had published this in a public space, fully aware that she had now trapped me in a cleverly set snare. How could I possibly comment and state that it was all a brazen, shameless lie? In the eyes of all these people, I would look either like a shameless liar going back on her word, or even worse, a cruel and heartless sister shattering her own sister's dreams. My fingers, clumsy and trembling, struggled to dial her number. She answered only on the second ring. "Hello, Pamela." Her voice sounded sweet and serene. "What the hell did you just do?" I hissed, trying to speak as quietly as possible, as I was still in the office, but rage was rising in my throat like a spasm. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied with feigned innocence. "The Facebook post. You told the whole world I'm giving Grandma's apartment to Emma." "Oh." Her voice maintained a soul-chilling calm, even with a hint of amusement in it. "Aren't you?" "No, Mom. I clearly said that wasn't happening. I said the trip to Mexico was my final offer." "I thought you'd change your mind once you had time to think it over, darling." "By lying to everyone on social media? Are you insane?" At that moment, she stopped pretending. Her voice lost all warmth and became cold, sharp, and ruthlessly calculating. "I posted it so you couldn't refuse. Listen carefully. This Saturday, Emma has a graduation dinner at Romano's. There will be about 50 people. The whole family, friends, her classmates. You will need to bring the deed of gift for the apartment, all the property transfer documents, already signed and fully ready for filing. I couldn't believe my ears. This was no longer a hint, not a request. It was an ultimatum. And if I refuse, I exhaled, then I'll make sure everyone finds out what a liar and fraud you are, she replied without a hint of doubt. I'll tell everyone how you promised Emma the apartment and then treacherously broke your word. You work in public relations, Pamela. How will it look if rumors start that you can't be trusted, that you don't keep your promises? Do you think your company will want to keep an employee with such a tarnished reputation? I was speechless. A deafening ringing filled my ears. My own mother, my own flesh and blood, was shamelessly threatening to destroy my career, my professional reputation, everything I had built with such difficulty over the years. You have until Saturday, Pamela. Bring the documents or deal with the consequences. She hung up without letting me say another word. I sat staring at the darkened phone screen, feeling my heart pounding wildly, ready to burst out of my chest. Incredibly, unthinkably, she had actually done it. She had set a trap and was now trying to force me into it, using my own professional position as leverage. Almost on autopilot, driven by a last spark of hope, I immediately dialed Emma's number. Maybe she wasn't aware of this monstrous plan. Maybe she didn't approve of our mother's methods, and I could get through to her, talk some sense into her. Hi, Pamela. Her voice sounded even, as if nothing had happened. Emma, did you see what Mom posted on Facebook? Yes, I saw it. Her calm tone made my insides grow cold. Did you know she was going to do that? A short but telling pause followed. Yes, we discussed it. My heart clenched into a lump of icy pain. And you're perfectly fine with her lying and trying to blackmail me? Emma laughed. Not awkwardly, not nervously, but loudly and confidently. Blackmail? Oh, come on, Pamela, don't be so melodramatic. Her voice became condescending. You have 2 apartments and I have none. Don't you think that's a bit unfair? I earned my apartment. I exclaimed, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. "I worked for it, and you've been living in Grandma's for a whole year, completely rent-free." "Yes, and I'm grateful for that. Handout," she drawled with disdain. "But now I want something permanent, something that will truly belong to me." "Handout?" I was stunned by her audacity. "I paid for your 4 years of college." "And I'm grateful for your charity," she retorted, and there wasn't a hint of sincere gratitude in her voice. "But this is different. This is about my future." And without letting me say anything else, she hung up, just like our mother had. That night, I sat wrapped in darkness on my sofa, staring blankly at the ceiling where the shadows formed grotesque patterns. The 3 people I had naively considered family had instantly become absolute strangers, infinitely distant beings whose souls had been turned inside out, revealing their true, ugly nature. These people, connected to me only by the ghostly threads of kinship, seriously believed they could manipulate, pressure, and intimidate me into giving up property worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, a piece of my grandmother's soul. And then, through the lump of hopeless bitterness rising in my throat, through the tremors of humiliation and rage, I unexpectedly started to laugh. First quietly, then louder, and this laughter sounded bitter and cleansing in the silence of the apartment. They thought they were so clever, so sophisticated. They thought they had backed me into a corner with no way out, but they had no idea what game they were really playing and how their moves would backfire on them. The next morning, with cold resolve in my heart, I went to my home office and retrieved a cardboard box from the top shelf of the closet, still untouched and gathering dust. It contained the documents I had received after Grandma's passing: her will, property deeds, insurance policies, all the things I had reverently set aside right after the visit to the lawyer, unable then to delve into dry legal details. I picked up Grandma's will, and this time read every clause, every swirl of the elegant legal font. The apartment where Emma currently resided was, of course, listed as my legal property. The $150,000 in the account, also mine. But then my gaze fell on a line that made me straighten up and freeze. The real property located at 847 Maple Street. That was the address of my mother and Steve, the very house they had lived in for nearly 20 years, which they considered their inviolable family nest. According to this official document, it had always been owned by Grandma, and now, by all laws, it belonged to me. I reread this section 3 times to make sure I wasn't going crazy and had understood correctly. The house of my broken childhood, where I was made invisible, was now mine. It had belonged to my grandmother, and before her to my great-grandmother, and so on down the line. Apparently, when Dad died tragically, Grandma, driven by pure kindness and compassion, had simply allowed Mom to stay there without formalizing any official papers. But it had never truly been my mother's house. I had known this for a whole year since the day I first read the will, but I stubbornly pushed this information into the farthest corner of my mind, not wanting to exacerbate the already fragile relationship. I naively believed that we were more or less okay, that we had reached a shaky truce. Why rock the already unsteady boat? But now the boat hadn't just been rocked. It was about to be taken away from me. It was time to test how deep and cold the water was that they were so eager to push me into. I dialed my lawyer, David Morrison. He had helped me with my own apartment and was known for his ability to explain the most complex legal intricacies in simple, human terms. "David, it's Pamela. I need to ask you a few questions regarding inherited real estate." "Of course." His voice was collected. "What's happened?" I explained the situation in detail, restraining my emotions. How my family had been living all these years in the house that now legally belonged to me. How they had been there for decades but had never been the actual owners. "Do they have any tenant rights?" I asked, gripping the phone in my sweaty palm. David thought for a moment. "Did they ever sign a lease? Pay rent? Is there any official agreement?" "No," I replied. "Nothing like that." Grandma simply allowed them to live there after Dad's death. Then, from a legal standpoint, they are what we call guests or licensees. You can ask them to vacate at any time. A formal eviction process isn't required in this case. And if I want to do it officially, with eviction papers? We can do that, David replied without hesitation. That would give you an official paper trail. Show that the matter is being handled strictly at a legal level. How much time do you want to give them? Mentally, I transported myself to the Saturday dinner, heard my mother's smug, sweet voice in my memory, full of confidence in her impunity. I remembered Emma contemptuously calling my help a handout. 30 days, I said clearly. I can have all the papers ready by tomorrow. That applies to the apartment where your sister is living as well. Yes, I confirmed. Both properties. Pamela, may I ask what happened? This seems sudden. I briefly outlined the essence. The public Facebook post, the outright blackmail, the direct threats to my career and reputation. David whistled quietly. Well then, understood. Yes, we'll prepare these papers immediately. And, Pamela, he added seriously, you should document everything carefully. Save screenshots of those Facebook posts. If state law allows it, record your phone conversations. This looks like it could lead to serious proceedings. You're ahead of me on that, I replied. Hanging up, I leaned back in my chair, and for the first time in many days, a calm, confident smile appeared on my lips. Not a nervous smirk. They wanted to play cruel games. Well, fine. But they were about to find out they had picked the wrong opponent. Saturday arrived, and I headed to Romano's, surprised to feel not a storm of nervous tension inside, but a strange, almost detached calm. That morning, I had stopped by David's office and picked up the neatly folded eviction documents in a thick envelope. Now they lay in my bag, silent but incredibly weighty, and their official, legal appearance gave me confidence. The restaurant greeted me with the noise of voices and festive bustle. The room was decorated with garlands of balloons and a huge banner with Emma's name shining in congratulatory letters. As Mom had predicted, about 50 people had gathered. Relatives I hadn't seen in years, Emma's college friends, neighbors, and old family friends. They were all in high spirits, with glasses in hand, laughing and chatting, creating the illusion of a perfect celebration. I spotted Emma immediately in the center of the room. She was wearing a fancy new dress and was beaming with happiness, surrounded by her cheerful crowd. Seeing me, she waved and smiled with a surprisingly sincere, relaxed smile, which for a moment made my heart clench, and I felt almost sorry for what was about to happen. Almost immediately, Mom materialized from the crowd. "Pamela, you came. Did you bring the documents?" she whispered, but her gaze was firm and demanding, like a steel blade. "We'll see, Mom," I replied evasively. Steve approached and awkwardly, as if performing a mandatory ritual, hugged my shoulders. "Good to see you, Pamela. Big day for Emma, huh?" he said with strained heartiness. "Of course," I nodded. I spent some time making small talk with relatives and pretending to eat, but all the while I felt Mom's intense, unwavering gaze on me, full of impatient expectation. Finally, the climactic moment arrived. Time for toasts. Guests took turns standing up, raising their glasses, and giving touching speeches about Emma's achievements, how proud they were of her, and what a brilliant future awaited her. Then Mom stood up and, chiming a spoon against a crystal glass, drew everyone's attention. "I want to thank everyone who came to share this joyful day with us," she began, her voice sounding solemn. "And I have a special announcement." She turned and fixed a piercing gaze on me. "Emma's older sister, Pamela, wants to share some exciting news about her graduation gift." A silence fell over the room, and all eyes, full of curiosity and anticipation, turned to me. Mom was smiling, but her smile didn't reach her eyes, which remained cold as icebergs. I slowly rose from my seat, feeling dozens of pairs of eyes boring into me. These people, gathered here, thought they were about to witness a touching act of family generosity. They couldn't possibly imagine the drama unfolding before their eyes. "Thank you, Mom," I began, and my voice sounded surprisingly steady. "Actually, I do have an announcement." I took my phone from my pocket and opened the voice recording app, a habit developed over years in PR, where people often say one thing and then just as easily deny it. This week, I've thought a lot about a gift for Emma's graduation, and I've decided that I won't be giving her anything. A collective, resonant gasp of astonishment swept through the room. Emma's face, radiant just a moment ago, instantly turned pale, and Mom stared at me with her jaw dropped, unable to hide her shock. "You see, my family tried to blackmail me into gifting my inherited apartment to Emma," I continued, and steel notes sounded in my voice. "They published an outright lie on social media to pressure me into it. They threatened to destroy my career, so I thought everyone present deserved to hear what really happened." I pressed play, and my mother's voice, clear and ruthless, filled the restaurant space. "I posted it so you couldn't refuse. This Saturday. You will need to bring the deed of gift. Otherwise, I'll make sure everyone finds out what a liar you are. You work in public relations, Pamela. Do you think your company will want to keep an employee with such a reputation?" The recording lasted about 2 minutes, and throughout that time, there was absolute tomb-like silence in the room, broken only by her own treacherously calm voice. When the sound cut off, I put my phone away, and without taking my eyes off my mother, who was trembling with suppressed rage, I took the coveted envelope from my bag. "What is this?" she whispered, and her whisper was filled with panic and disbelief. "This is an official notice to vacate the house you are living in," I said clearly. "The house that actually belongs to me, inherited from Grandma. You have 30 days to find new accommodation." Then I turned to Emma, who was already crying quiet, offended tears, and handed her an identical set of documents. "This applies to you too. 30 days to vacate Grandma's apartment." I looked around the room, seeing a gamut of emotions on the guests' faces, from shock and incomprehension to outright condemnation. The air was thick with tense silence, and I knew I had to finish what I started. "Since everyone concerned is here, I thought you deserved to know the unvarnished truth." My voice sounded clear and crisp, filling the space. "That house they've been living in has belonged to me for a whole year now. I allowed them to stay there, driven by a naive belief that we were family, that blood ties meant something. But as recent events have shown, I was sorely mistaken." Mom couldn't take her eyes off the eviction papers, her fingers nervously fiddling with the corners of the sheets, as if trying to feel their texture and confirm their reality. "This can't be legal," she whispered, but cracks of uncertainty were already audible in her voice. "This is some kind of nightmare." "If you doubt it, call your lawyer, Mom," I retorted, feeling an inner strength growing. "But I'm almost sure you'll quickly confirm the full and indisputable legality of these papers." Then I turned to Emma, whose once radiant face was now contorted with resentment and confusion. "Congratulations on your graduation, little sister," I said with a cold, polite smile. "Welcome to adult life. Here, you have to pay your own bills." With those words, I turned and headed for the exit, feeling dozens of prickly gazes on my back. I didn't look back once. The drive home felt incredibly light, as if a stone that had been weighing on my shoulders for years had finally rolled off into an abyss. I felt not just relief, but a strange, cleansing emptiness. My phone vibrated before I even had time to turn off the engine. Mom was blazing on the screen. I declined the call. It rang again immediately. This time, Emma. I declined again, then Steve, and then Mom again. By the time I crossed the threshold of my apartment, there were already 12 missed calls on the screen, and the voicemail was full. I didn't listen to a single message. Pouring myself a glass of rich red wine, I settled on the sofa by the window and stared at the flickering lights of the night city stretching out below. For the first time in my adult life, I felt absolutely free from their suffocating expectations, from the web of manipulation and guilt. The phone didn't fall silent, vibrating continuously with incoming messages. Finally, curiosity got the better of me, and I scrolled through them. Mom, Pamela, please call me. We need to talk. This is all a big misunderstanding. Emma, you can't do this to us. Where are we supposed to live? Steve, this is insane. Pamela, your mother is having a panic attack. Mom, I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. Please don't do this to the family. Emma, I'm your sister. How can you be so cruel? Mom, we raised you better. The last message made me laugh out loud bitterly. They raised me. Mom had officially given up her parental rights when I was 13. I was raised by Grandma, the only truly kindred person. I turned off the phone and went to bed with an unusually light heart. The next morning at 10 to 8, someone started pounding fiercely on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw all three of them. Mom stood with red, tear-swollen eyes. Emma looked haggard as if she hadn't slept all night, and Steve stood dejected and embarrassed. I opened the door but didn't move aside, not inviting them in. "What do you want?" I asked coldly. Mom immediately burst into tears. "Pamela, darling, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I made a terrible mistake. I was just trying to help Emma start her life, but it all went wrong." "You tried to blackmail me," I reminded her mercilessly. I know, and I'm terribly sorry. But please, you can't just throw us out of our home. We've lived there for 20 years. "That was never your home," I cut her off. "It was Grandma's house, and she out of pure kindness let you live there." Then Steve stepped forward, trying to speak rationally. "Pamela, be reasonable. We can't find a new place in 30 days. You know what rental prices are like now?" "You should have thought of that before trying to steal my apartment," I retorted. Emma, sniffling, whispered, "Where am I supposed to go? I don't have a job yet, no money for rent." "Figure it out," I shrugged. "You're an adult, remember?" Mom grabbed my hand. Her fingers were sticky from tears. "Please, Pamela. We're family. Family forgives each other." I sharply pulled my hand away. Family also doesn't blackmail each other. "What if we pay you rent?" Steve unexpectedly suggested, trying to find some practical way out. "We could sign a lease and pay you every month." I looked at him carefully. At least he was trying to think straight. "How much?" I asked. Mom immediately chimed in, her voice becoming saccharine and ingratiating. "Any amount. We just need somewhere to live." I thought for a moment. The market rent for that house was about $1,500 a month, but they had caused me so much pain, so much anger. $1,200 a month for the house, I announced, and Emma can stay in the apartment for $1,000 a month. Emma's eyes widened with genuine horror, showing the panic of someone suddenly realizing the full weight of adult responsibility. $1,000, she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I don't have a job." A cold wave of determination rose within me, leaving no room for the old pity. "Then you'd better hurry up and find one, or move back in with Mom and Dad," was my reply, merciless and sharp as a whip crack. Mom immediately nodded with desperate eagerness, as if grasping at a straw. Yes, of course, we can pay $1,200, she hastily agreed, her fingers clutching the edge of her bag convulsively. "When do we start paying?" Steve asked, trying to steer the conversation back to a businesslike tone. "First payment is due in 1 week, I announced, feeling my control over the situation strengthening. "Miss even one payment, and you're out immediately. There won't be a second chance. It's non-negotiable." Steve nodded, and a look of relief flashed across his face, as if he had just averted an imminent disaster. "That's fair. We'll manage." But Emma was still sobbing, digging in her heels like a petulant child. "I can't afford $1,000 a month." My shoulders shrugged in an indifferent gesture. "Then vacate the apartment. I can easily rent it to someone else for $1,500. Mom, switching to Emma, babbled in a comforting tone, "You'll come back home, sweetie. It'll all work out." Emma, trapped by her own powerlessness, just glared at me venomously, but she truly had no choice left. "I'll need a signed lease agreement by tomorrow," I continued, cementing my victory, "and I want the first month's rent paid in advance." They all nodded with that unnatural, feverish readiness of people backed into a corner. After they left, when the door closed, silence fell, and I, without delay, dialed David's number, instructing him to draw up legally flawless lease agreements that would forever separate me from them with a wall of formalities. Then I contacted the property management company, giving instructions to prepare Grandma's apartment for new, adequate tenants as soon as Emma moved out. True to their word, they signed all the papers the very next day and handed me the first $1,200 in cash, and those bills in my hand felt not just like money, but a symbolic payment for the freedom I had gained. Emma, grumbling and complaining, soon packed her things and returned to her old childhood bedroom, while I, without wasting time, listed the vacant apartment on the market and soon found the perfect tenant, a pleasant graduate student who was happy to pay $1,500 a month for such a lovely place. The additional income turned out to be more than substantial. Together with the rent from Mom and Steve, I was receiving $2,700 monthly, and I immediately directed all this money towards early repayment of the mortgage on my own apartment, getting closer to full financial independence with every payment. Mom pays the rent punctually on the first day of each month, using electronic transfers so we don't even have to see each other. The management company handles all the hassle of communicating with the tenants, and I haven't spoken to any of them since that day they stood on my doorstep, humbly begging for forgiveness. Emma occasionally sends angry messages full of complaints about the horrors of living with her parents, but I don't dignify them with a response, leaving her to face the consequences of her own choices. A few months ago, I ran into one of Mom's neighbors at the supermarket. She recognized me and started admiring my generosity, assuring me how wonderful it was to rent to my own family at such reasonable prices. I just smiled politely and said, "Thank you," feeling not the slightest need to explain anything. Honestly, I no longer consider them family. They showed their true colors once and for all when they decided they could manipulate and threaten me. And now to me, they are just tenants, business partners who top up my bank account every month. I've made new friends at work, started dating again, and even joined a book club whose cozy evenings remind me of those spent reading with Grandma. My life has gained long-awaited peace and stability. There's no more room for drama or emotional swings. Sometimes I think about what Grandma would say about all this, and I feel she would be proud of me, seeing how I learned to stand up for myself, because she always said one must be strong and never let people take advantage of one's kindness. "Kindness without boundaries, dear, is no longer kindness," she often said. "It's just a doormat for people to wipe their feet on." That lesson was hard learned, but I learned it for good. My family tried to rob me, but in the end, they are the ones paying me. They thought they were so clever, devising their pathetic scheme, but they forgot one important thing. I am no longer that frightened little girl used as an unpaid nanny and servant. I have become a successful woman who owns property and knows exactly how to protect herself and her boundaries. And now I sleep deeply, peacefully at night, knowing that for sure.